Hello viewers, my name is RJ Sudha. I'm the founder and the voice of Tamizh Suvai on Radio Mirchi 1310. Today we are here to discuss a very important topic, the Census 2020. The primary purpose, it serves for the South Asian population, or for that matter, any person living here in the United States. Who does it apply to? And most importantly, what are the benefits that the community can gain out of participating in this exercise? With me today, we have three very accomplished women, Vandana Kumar, Aarti Kohli, and Julia Marks. Vandana Kumar, as most of you know in the Indian circle, is a publishing executive with 32 years of track record in the industry. She co-founded India Currents magazine in 1987 and published an award-winning print magazine from April 1987 to December 2017. Fully digital today, India Currents has the largest following amongst the Indians in the United States. Vandana has won the Asian American Hero Award from the County of Santa Clara and the Leadership in Business Award from the California Legislative Assembly. Welcome, Vandana. How are you doing?
Good. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm so honored to be here with such an accomplished group of people.
Yeah.
I'd like to, take this opportunity to say that, while those that are familiar with India Currents, that we have been doing community journalism that no other Indian media does. And we've been doing it for over 3 decades.
Wonderful. That's wonderful. Yeah. Yeah. Similarly, Tamizh Suvai, my radio show also, although we try to do a mixer of community radio as well as entrepreneurial and as well as entertainment radio. It's just a mix of all these things. But I'm more towards community radio as well. So I think we both share a common vision in both our aspects in that way. Next on the line in the panel is Ms. Aarti Kohli. Aarti Kohli is the Executive Director of Advancing Justice, Asian Law Caucus. Previously, the Deputy Director, Aarti Kohli, is an experienced non-profit lawyer, manager and philanthropist advisor, and with more than 15 years of experience in issues impacting low-income and undocumented immigrants. Welcome, Aarti.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here. And Vandana, I know we've crossed paths when I was a student at UC Berkeley, and so I've admired your work for many years.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, Vandana has been such an inspiration for me. I mean, she's just doing an amazing job. And next in our panel is Julia Marks. Julia Marks is the staff attorney with Voting Rights and Census Program. Before joining Advancing Justice ALC, she clerked for Honorable Keith P. Ellison of the United States District Court for Southern District of Texas. Julia previously litigated civil rights class actions and other high-impact cases at disability rights advocates to expand access to public and private sector services. Welcome, Julia.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really glad that we're having this conversation today.
Yeah, I mean, what better set of people can have this conversation? We have the cream of the people who can do this, and with the caucus people who can answer our questions. I think the listeners can benefit the most with this conversation. So, shall we get started with the set of questions that we have come up with, Andrea and? So I just have a set of questions. Maybe we can just start it. Why is the census so important? What is at stake? And in fact, I did not realize till recently that it was a law.
Would you like me to start? Or?
Yes, exactly. Any of you can answer my question.
Okay. Well, maybe I can give a little bit of background. So Advancing Justice, Asian Law Caucus, the organization that Julia and I are a part of, is almost 50 years old. Oh. And for that long, we have been working with Asian and Pacific Islander communities. And I'm an immigrant. I was born in India, and I came with my parents as a child. But one of the things that's important, I think, and what's challenging for our organization is that the term Asian and Pacific Islander is really broad, right? And so we're talking about a lot of different communities. And this is why we're so excited to be here today, because we really want to have all our communities be visible and recognized. And I think one of the things that you and I, we're out in the grocery stores or in the community, we see is that actually our communities are growing. But that won't be recognized if we don't actually have people fill out the census. Because we might be visible to each other on the street, but we're not going to be visible to government and to others if we're not actually signed up and the data is not collected. So it's very important. And one of the goals of our organization is to build power in our communities. And the first basic step of building power is actually showing up and saying that I am here, we are here. And so that's why the census is important. And in addition, there's other reasons, and maybe I'll pass it off to Julia, who, by the way, is an amazing technical expert, knows inside out all these questions, who can, provide some of the other reasons.
Sure.
Yeah, thanks, Aarti. I think it's, it's so important in the big picture to stand up and say, we have so many diverse communities in California, and make sure that the record reflects that. And then what that data is used for is also so important, and that's why we need a complete count. So a big thing is the distribution of federal funding. There's an estimate that more than $1.5 trillion every year in federal funding is distributed out to states and local governments, based in part on census data. So we need to have local communities be fully counted so that those federal funds are reaching local communities in the right amounts. So it's a chance to, responding to the census is a chance to make sure you're getting your fair share for your family and your community. And then the other big piece of it is political representation. So the census is mandated in the Constitution because we understand that to have an effective representative government, we need to know how many people live where, so that the electoral system adequately reflects those communities. So participating in the census makes sure that the data that's used to figure out how many congressional seats each state gets and how those district boundaries are drawn, that needs to be based on accurate data so that there is fair representation. So while voting's a really important piece of civic engagement, census itself is the starting point in all of that, and in making sure we have a fair and inclusive government.
Thanks. Aarti, I want to go back to, you said you were in touch with us when you were in UC Berkeley. I'm so astounded. I guess, being around for so long, I've come across many people like you who were young students and starting out, and now they're at PBS and at various places. And they say, oh, we saw India Currents while we were growing up. It was there on our coffee table. But now all of you are in important positions and, leading organizations. And I feel such a sense of pride, right, that how wonderfully our community has grown. And you're right, we do see that visibly, when we go out and about, especially in Santa Clara County. Yeah. Since you mentioned that Julia is the one who has her, probably the numbers person, I'd be curious to know, the self-response rates must be coming in by now, right, Julia? Or if you have any historical data, perhaps it'll be interesting for our viewers to know, where are we on as far as being counted in Santa Clara County, Alameda County. I think these are the two areas that we have a large viewership and readership. Curious to know about that.
Yeah, definitely. So we do have some data. The Census Bureau shares out how many households are responding. Doesn't give us too much detail, but it does tell us in each geographic area what the response rates are like. And the Bay Area is doing relatively well compared to some other parts of the state, such as the Central Valley in Southern California. But that doesn't mean we have full response, and our goal is to have full response. So In California, overall, we're seeing about 60%, 61% of households have responded, which means there are a lot of households left to go. And then when we compare that to 2010, at a similar time in the census, we're a little bit behind. So in 2010, it was closer to 68% in the state of California, whereas, as I mentioned, we're at 61% now. So I know that's a lot of numbers, but the key takeaway is that, we're making progress to getting census response, but we're not really where we want to be yet. And there are reasons for that. We understand this is a really challenging time. There's so much on people's minds. People are just trying to make it through the day, and filling out a government form doesn't seem like a priority. But it's important to remember, as I mentioned, all these services that we need really now more than ever, like healthcare and housing support and food support, education programs, all of that we really need, and responding to the census will help make sure that's adequately funded for the next 10 years, really. This is a survey that happens every 10 years. So we want to make sure that we keep the message out there that the census is still happening and that people can and should still respond.
Thank you for that, Julia. Let's say that a person wants to get started with a census application. What would be the basic sort of information that he or she would need to get started with that?
Yeah, so it's a short survey, and we want to reiterate that it's a short survey. So you need to include your name and some basic identifying information. It asks for sex, it asks for race and ethnicity, your birth date, your age, but it doesn't ask for additional information like citizenship or immigration or income. None of that is on the census form. And we want that to be very clear because, as you know, there were conversations about possibly adding a citizenship question. And that effort absolutely failed, and there is no citizenship question on the census. So it's really just seeking the more basic demographic information. And it's really important to remember that the census is a household-based survey. So you're not just filling it out for yourself, but you're filling it out for everyone in your family and everyone in your home. And that even includes roommates or if your cousin lives with you, they get included on the census. Your children need to be included. Elders who live with you should be included. So we need to be sure we count all the folks in each household, not just, the main resident. And the census is, originally it was, folks were informed by mail and there was an identification number. And so if you go online to fill it out, because you haven't yet, it might ask you for that, but you actually can fill it out even if you've lost that number. So don't let that deter you if you didn't get to respond to the paper census already. You can still go to the website, you can still call into the official bureau hotline, and you can just say, I lost the paper you sent me, but I live at this address and there are 6 people in my household, and then give them that very basic demographic information about the people who live in your household.
That's very good to know. Very good to know. Okay.
That's actually super useful. I was going to have a follow-up question based on what you said about, people in the household. But what about, there are all these in-law quarters, right? We live in the Bay Area where there are a number of such places, and which are oftentimes rented out to other people. So the onus of filling this out, does it fall on the landlord, or do these two separate households, so to speak, even though they are under one roof, do they all get counted? It's a little bit, hard to explain to people. What do you suggest?
It is hard to explain. I can give you the technical answer first, and then I'll try to summarize it into something that's, a shareable soundbite. So there's a little bit of variation in terms of how a house is registered with the census. So hopefully the census knows that if you have an in-law unit, there are 2 addresses on your property. But we know that's not always the case. So the best thing to do is to have each unit coordinate and either decide to do one all together or each separately submit the information. But there needs to be a little bit of communication so that folks know, like, oh, I already filled out the census, but I didn't include you. You should go online and also do it. Or I'm gonna fill out the census. I'm not sure if you have. If you haven't, I'm gonna include you in it. So talking with your, roommates, landlords, et cetera, if you're living in an in-law unit or some other kind of more dense housing situation. In an apartment building, if you already each get separate mail, then it's not an issue, right? It's just if the postal system doesn't know you have multiple units, then you need to be coordinating with your neighbors.
Got it.
Yeah.
Let me just, there's a lot of complex situations. I have a college-aged daughter, so we filled ours out, and because on April 1st she was in our home because of COVID-19, we included her on the list. And then we got a follow-up call. The Census Bureau does follow up because I think her college might have listed her as well. And so they asked for that clarification of, where does she normally live? And so it's a little complex at this moment because normally she wouldn't have been home. She would have been at college. The other piece is that they will sometimes follow up to clarify. And at first I was like, is this like a telemarketer? Is this somebody trying to, these days, there's so much suspicion about anybody calling you, but it was actually the Census Bureau.
That's good.
So, and that is, a thing that they do, and people should know that it is a normal thing. It's not bizarre to get this call.
Oh, so that's actually super useful to know.
Yeah.
You said she's normally not there, but we're not living in normal times at all.
Yes.
And in fact, that's one of the thoughts that I had. Are you supposed to count your kid? Because normally she's not there, but she might be with you for the next 1 year. Who knows?
Yeah.
So it's good that they're calling and clarifying. And I'd gone for a hearing in San Francisco that the Ethnic Media Services was doing. And one of the things that Sandy Close mentioned, I don't know if you guys know her, but that children under 5 are among the highest undercounted. Why is that? And do people just think that we are supposed to count the adults? Like, do you have any historical information? How do we make that point to people? How do we make that come across so that, they have to, so that they realize, like, really everyone should be counted? What do you think, Aarti?
I think Julia is better suited to answer this question. It's true. What you're saying is what Sandy said is absolutely true. Children are undercounted, and in fact, there's a separate effort at the census to make sure children are recognized. And I don't know what it is, if it's people perhaps, thinking it's really an adult-based counting. Yeah, Julia, I don't know if you have thoughts on this.
Well, I have to say, I also don't know the exact reason why that is how it plays out, but I can also confirm that that's true. I actually heard an interesting fact that more people are missed in the census because they've been left off of the form in the household that they live in that did respond, than people being missed because of the total failure to respond by the whole household. So that's why we try to emphasize the importance of including everyone, including, as you point out, children. It might be that the younger children, aren't seen as full people yet, and so they're left off. Another sometimes complicated situation is when there's joint custody between two households. And so someone might assume the other parent listed the child, and then that kid isn't counted.
Good point.
Yeah.
Seems to be communication is key.
Yeah, and there are some fun efforts to uplift this message, and I'm really glad that you've raised it on this show, because it's something we need to keep in mind. One organization has put together some children's books about the census, so people can get their kids excited about the census and also remember to include them.
Yeah, that's good.
Nice.
Maybe this lockdown period is a good time to educate the kids, to make sure they teach the parents to come up, tell them, okay, daddy, mommy, did you count me in the census? That kind of thing. That'll be nice. That's a good way to keep them knowledgeable, and also teach the parents also this process. Yeah. So there's a middle spectrum of, we talked about children, we talked about college going kids. Maybe it's time to talk about aged parents. The Indian community has the parents who live here. They are either green card holders or maybe even citizens who spend maybe 6 months here with their children, and then they go back to India for 6 months and they rotate. Or maybe they even spend 6 months here in the West Coast, another 6 months East Coast with the sibling, with the other children. How are they to be counted? Do they count and they're only counted once, twice? How does that happen?
Yeah, that's a great question. So 6 months is kind of our magic number for figuring out whether and where someone should be counted. So if you live somewhere for 6 months of the year or more, 6 months plus a day, then that's where you should be counted, you know? If you live there for less than 6 months, then it's not seen as your residence and you shouldn't be counted there. People also should only be counted in one place. You know, we are very worried about an undercount, but we also want to make sure that the count is accurate and counts where that person resides for most of the year. So if you split your time between a family in one state and a family in another state, just pick the one where you spend most of the time. Another way to kind of think about it is it's the place where you're a resident. You need to be represented in the government. You might use services there. You might send your kids to school there. The bigger picture of why we're counted comes into play. So we have the hard 6 month rule, but if you don't want to use a math approach, you can also think about what's your home? What's your community where you live most of the time?
You know, this is I don't know whether other communities have the same thing, but this is a very common thing among Asian Indians, you know, where you have parents that come and they live with you. If they have several children, then they might travel from one person to another, but it's definitely a very cultural thing. You can't have your parents go and live in a old person's home or you know, in a senior home. They're normally living with you. And sometimes the siblings, you know, they take turns. That the parents will spend a few months with me, a few months with them, so that nobody feels left out or has to bears all the responsibilities. But it brings me to another point, though. A lot of seniors who are on things like Medi-Cal, does the census play a role in Medi-Cal at all? I don't know who's better suited to answer this.
Yeah, I can go. And I will respond to the Medi-Cal question, but what you were saying about families who move, you know, from one household to another during the year, I will add, if you do that and you therefore aren't able to identify where you live for 6 + 1 months, you know, because you move around between families too much or the math is confusing, then you can default to where you were on April 1st, just as a backup. The primary question is, where do you live for most of the year? But if there is no good answer to that question, then you do where you are on April 1st. And sorry, that's a little technical, but sometimes it's technical to try to get everyone accurately. But yeah, to your question about Medi-Cal, So medical programs that are funded by the government are, informed by the census data. So when the government is figuring out where to distribute funding, they do use the census data to calculate it out. How much does this state get? How much does that state get? So it does matter in that way. But I also want to raise the fact that it matters to healthcare services in other ways too, beyond the funding. So some of the, the planning components, like what will our medical system look like, that all relies on census data. When folks are figuring out whether to invest in a hospital in an area, they'll look at census data on like who lives in that area, what needs do we anticipate over the next 5 to 10 years. So there's both the funding and government programs piece, but then the kind of like on the ground decision making about what services people are going to need. And then in addition to the medical component, seniors who use senior centers or who use food programs, like senior food programs, those are also programs that are affected by census data. So it's healthcare plus other services that communities rely on.
Thank you for that. Along those terms, does participating in this exercise affect the unemployment benefits at all?
No, it doesn't. So the census is just used to create a big anonymous data. So like a count of how many people live in an area, or information about how many children are in an area, so we can plan out to make sure we have the right number of schools or the right number of 5th grade teachers. It doesn't share any information about the individuals who've responded to the census. So it doesn't interact with your taxes, it doesn't interact with your housing situation or any of that as an individual. It's just so that we have this demographic information that we need.
Yeah, I think I would really want to emphasize that it's actually very confidential.
Okay.
So, we have members of our communities, everybody, there are people with different immigration statuses, right? Some people might have a work permit, maybe it's expired, maybe folks are undocumented. None of that is either recorded or shared.
Okay.
And it's really important, I think, one of the things we don't talk a lot about is that we do have people who are undocumented in our communities, right? We have low-wage workers, we have folks, sometimes we have folks, many people in one living situation, and they're worried about, if I share this, people might know I may be, it's violating my landlord's rule or whatever it is.
Right.
It's not, none of that information is shared.
Got it.
And so it's actually even more important for us to know that these folks are a part of our communities and they have to be counted. Part of the reason that the laws became even stronger on confidentiality was because of Japanese internment. In World War II, you might know that Japanese Americans were rounded up and put in prisons, basically, because they were seen as a national security threat. After that, the government acknowledged that it had really done something wrong, and that we needed to do even better to make sure that data was confidential. And so because that great wrong happened in the United States, Congress, passed a law saying, we're not going to let this happen again. We're not going to let census data be misused. And if someone does try to misuse it, that's a crime. So these protections have been there for a long time, and they're there for a reason, because the purpose of this is not to enforce, not to punish people. It's really to make sure that we know, how many people are here.
Thank you for that. It's a
Sure.
It's a good answer. Yeah, thank you for
Yeah, actually, it's very interesting. I had not realized what the historical context
that.
was
Exactly,
for
exactly.
anonymizing. And in today's world, really, data security is a big concern,
Yeah, yeah,
not just for average individual, but even for countries at large.
yeah.
That, the interesting thing that we've had, in trying to talk about participating in the census, making sure people are counted, is I'd like to share an anecdote with you. Is one of my friends, she has a Punjabi cook who comes to and helps her with housework, and she was asking her, it's like, hey, have you filled the census? And she said, no, I haven't filled the census because, the government knows everything about me.
Uh-huh.
And so she asked us, like, how do you mean? She said, for everything we have to go to the government. It's like, whether it's from getting a driver's license, getting a passport, getting anything, and the government knows what the population is. So she asked, how do you know? And so she said, when you drive on the highways and you enter any city, it says you're now entering San Jose, population 1 million. She said, it's right up there.
So smart.
So people, even who are working in homes, they're smart people.
Yeah, exactly.
And they're attentive, but they're also in some ways misinformed, because that's not just enough. That data also came from someplace. We had a similar, we actually wrote stories about 2 such experiences, and I thought they were rather interesting because they're very representative. It isn't like people don't know, but an average person can think like that, like an Uber driver who said the same thing. It's like, oh, the government knows everything about me. I don't need to do this, it's a waste of time. How do you convince somebody like that? Ideas?
Well, I think, you have to think about the message that has resonated the most is that it helps you get your fair share. So if they have children, who are in public school, public school funding is related to census. If they're getting any benefits, if they're using, any government services, those are dependent on the census, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's like, you're not going to get your own fair share if you don't fill it out. And I think that's the message that seems to resonate with people. And it's not actually true. I mean, that the government, we wouldn't have the census if the government knew where you were, and the whole point is really, I think it's a fascinating and important structure in that it's self-reporting. That's what it starts with. It starts with you. You are empowered to just report on yourself. No one is out there trying to find you, and unless you are not reporting at that point, then we try and help. But I think it's important for folks to understand that that population sign is based on most likely census data, and that comes from self-reporting. It's not from a drone that is flying over the city. So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Julie, I don't know if you want to add something.
No, I really, I agree with that, Aarti, and it's worth, for the sign example, which is so appealing to me because I love numbers, but it's worth remembering that like our populations are constantly changing. People are coming, people are going. I looked up some data. Asian Indian communities in the Bay Area have grown by more than 65,000 people just in the last few years, according to census estimates. But those are census estimates that happen between censuses. And so this is our chance to get that updated information and have it on the record. And this census that happens every 10 years is supposed to be an actual count. The Bureau has looked at using other government records and finding other ways to figure out how many people are here. But that information isn't always accurate. And so they take the time and they invest the resources to do this actual count every 10 years. And so responding to that is really important and is a good way to make sure you're counted, because you might not be if you hope that the government figures it out and guesses you're there based on other records.
Yeah, I have always thought that, when you present any information, because I think people are inherently selfish, it's like, what's in it for me? So if we are able to present it in terms like that, they pay more attention, that. So I liked what you said, Aarti, about it helps you get your fair share. And whether it is, the resources that your local school might need, whether it's ESL, whether it might be school lunches, it could be any of those.
Special ed, maybe, yeah.
Special ed, lots of things.
Yeah.
So interesting, interesting.
There was a small thread that Vandana started off that I think we didn't take off about the security of data. I come from an engineering background, so I just want to complete the thread. What if we all doing self-reporting online, and we just want to make sure that the data we enter is secure? How can can the government ensure that the data that we submit is encrypted and secure?
Yeah, so the census response website is encrypted. The data you send through that is encrypted. And the census has been working for multiple years to make sure that this is a secure online system.
Okay.
They won't share the details of all their attempted attacks on their own system, I think for security reasons. But this is actually the first census that is through an online system first. And so the Bureau has been extra careful to make sure that it's rolled out correctly and in a secure manner.
Okay.
So.
All right, that's good to know.
So there are many assurances from the Bureau of the security of the system.
Okay.
And we recognize not all folks are comfortable using computers or sharing data through the computer. And if that's the case, that's also okay. And they can call the Bureau instead and do it by phone. So there are, multiple ways to respond if you're more comfortable with the phone versus online.
All right, okay. Is there a penalty? I know it's a law to participate in the census. Is there a penalty not participating in the census?
Yeah, so on record, there is a small fine in theory that could be applied if you don't respond. But historically, the census does not enforce that law. I think the last example of an attempt to enforce the law about requiring census response was back in 1970.
Okay.
And that wasn't even a successful effort to enforce the law. So there's definitely a mindset at the Bureau and among, census nerds like me that it's a carrot over stick approach, right? Like there are so many benefits to census participation. We're all better off if we're uplifting the benefits and encouraging self-response and self-identification rather than saying, oh, you have to do this and we'll come after you if you don't. So yeah, technically the law requires response, but there's so many other great reasons to respond.
Okay. And what are the deadlines for this self-reporting, and when can we expect enumerators to come door to door if we fail to do the self-reporting process?
Yeah, so the deadlines have been extended because of coronavirus. So right now you have until October to respond if you want to.
Okay.
But the Bureau is going to start sending folks out into the field for households that don't respond in August. So if you want to avoid having someone come to your door, the best thing you can do is just go ahead and respond between now and the end of July. And then if you forget to, someone might come knock on your door in August or September to try to get you to respond.
Okay. Could you remind our users on how to go online and respond, do the self-reporting?
Yes, definitely. So you can go to wait, I always get it wrong with the my2020census.gov.
My2020census.gov.
Yes, my2020census.gov.
Okay.
And then when you go to the website, they have some language options. There are 13 languages for the online portal.
Okay.
And then there are also some written resources. If you speak a different language, you can get a step-by-step guide to what the English form is asking. And so you can get a little more information in your language about the questions that can help you out as you're filling out the form.
Hey, Julia, I want to follow up on what you just said before we close. I know we are getting close, but I think it's really phenomenal that the Census Bureau has created collateral and so many other partner agencies have created collateral in so many different languages. I went on the website and I was browsing even among the Indian languages. I know I sent to Sudha the one in Tamil.
Yeah.
Because when I saw that in Tamil, I found in Bengali, I found in Punjabi, I found so many languages. And as it happens, I know community leaders in each of these spaces. So it's like I sent to a Bengali, person who, a friend who manages a large WhatsApp group for Bengalis. I said, can you post this in Bengali? It's so cool. It's not just the fact that we are sharing, the fact that an organization like the Census Bureau has taken the effort to reach out in so many different ways. How much more can they actually say that we matter?
Yeah.
And
yeah, can I just say, Vandana, the thing is, this didn't happen just out of the goodness of their hearts. This happened because we pushed them and have been pushing them for years.
Yeah.
And so, this has been a decades-long advocacy with the Census Bureau, and to encourage them to produce materials in languages. And then we ourselves, with our partners, for the languages they don't cover, are trying to provide materials because we recognize the diversity of our communities.
Yeah.
The language diversity is so broad, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah. From India, where we have 22 official languages. It's mind-boggling,
Mm-hmm.
But honestly, I really do salute the efforts of all the people that have made this happen as we see it today, because I know that it wasn't the same many years ago.
right.
And but I think these serve as encouragements to our community members that they need to do their part. In a democracy,
Absolutely.
we all play a role, and that each one matters and each one has a voice.
Absolutely.
And these are ways in which we can encourage people. And I've been sending all of this out to various people, quite enjoying the process myself, of discovering.
I think I have a job for you.
I am doing that job. I think the biggest asset I bring to the table really is the connections that I have over a very, very large group of people and over a very large period of time. And I'm a known quantity. I'm a trusted quantity from a lot of people.
Yes.
I'm a proven quantity, I should say that.
32 years is not something that you can be overlooked.
People are happy to participate and spread the word and, get this out. I
can't thank you enough. I mean, this is the key. We need community leaders like you who are trusted, who have relationships to help get the word out, because, you know, Julia and I know a few people, but, you know, a lot of people don't know who we are and where we're coming from, and they need to hear it from a trusted source.
Thank you. That's why
yeah.
That's why I reached out to Sudha, because I knew that she's another leader, and sharing this information with her audience is going to, you know, increase the outreach. You know.
Absolutely.
So well, thank you all for the lovely words about India Currents. You know, it's
amazing. You're doing an amazing job. Thank you, Julia. Thank you, Aarti. Thank you, Vandana, so much for making this interview a very productive one. We look forward to a big participation in this specific census. I really hope we can spread this word to a larger community, and let's hope this will make a bigger impact. Thank you again, all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.